I need you to just like take it down from the 11 that you've been living at to like can we just at least do a 5? No, she's stolen one of my slippers too. Hey kids, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza, that was Cheese, Winnie's back there somewhere. And we're gonna do a recent reads wrap up. Because again, if I wait too long, it becomes too many books, and my brain cannot retain all of that knowledge. So we do it when it's a little bit more, a little more, this is probably the worst possible day for me to be recording anything because words are not wording today. My brain is like, no. You think you speak English? Just barely, but we're gonna try our best. So hopefully I just learn how to form words with my mouth again while Cheese does yoga poses. Let's do some recent reads before it gets overwhelming. We'll keep the list short. The first book that we're going to talk about is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brando Sando. This book is part of the Cosmere, but I believe, well, aside from Mistborn, the Mistborn trilogy, I don't know if that's involved in the Cosmere, but if Winnie, that's a great spot. If the camera moves, oh well, Winnie's comfortable. If Mistborn is in the Cosmere, this is not my first Cosmere book. If it isn't, welcome to my first book in the Cosmere, which is a universe that Mr. Brandon Sanderson has created. This is the first book that was released via the Kickstarter during the 2020 times, the dark days when the world shut down. Brandon Sanderson wrote 4 books in secret, and these books were not ever going to be released, but then he decided to release them. This is the first book of those 4 books. While the rest of us were playing Animal Crossing and eating too many carbs, he was creating entire worlds. It's fine. I feel fine about my choices. The note on the back actually says that he started writing this in secret as a novel just for his wife, and she urged him to share it with the rest of the world. How he describes this book as well in the acknowledgments is they sat down, watched The Princess Bride, and then he had the thought, well, what if Buttercup hadn't just sat around and ended up almost marrying a prince in The Princess Bride? What if she had gone after Wesley? In this book, our main character, Tress, is in love with a local boy named Charlie. Now, Charlie is a little bit out of reach due to who he is and who his family is. And then when Charlie goes off into the world, Tress has to go after him. She lives on this teeny tiny island, but on the planet that Tress lives on, the seas are not full of water, they're full of spores, and the spores are dangerous, but each individual sea has a different kind of spore. When the spores are introduced to water, or when water is introduced to the spores, crazy things happen. The magic in this is really cool, the fact that it's taking place on another planet, but they're on boats, and it's not high-tech sci-fi, but I guess it is sci-fi because it's on another planet, but it's fantasy. I don't know how to describe the books that Brandon Sanderson writes, other than if you like the idea of The Princess Bride, but instead of waiting around, Buttercup went after Wesley, or Tress went after Charlie, you'll like this book. It reads a little more YA and on the younger side of YA sometimes. It's very whimsical, it's lovely, the narrator is hilarious. It's a sweet, fun story, and it was written out of love for the person that the author really loves, and you can feel that as well. I really, really enjoy this, and I can't wait to read the rest of the books that come out from his 2020 writing fever. The next book that I finished after that one was Anatomy, a Love Story, and this is by Dana Schwartz. I will talk about both of these because I also read Immortality, a Love Story, which is the second part of this duology, but since it is a duology, let's talk about Anatomy. This is the story of Hazel. She is a young woman growing up in Edinburgh during the 1800s and a well-to-do family, and lives in a giant manor house just outside of town. Now, during this time period, women were basically only expected to marry well and have babies, but that's not the life Hazel wanted. Hazel has aspirations of becoming a surgeon. She wants to be famous and help people and just is totally obsessed with reading books about surgery. I am so sorry if you can hear her chewing that really loud bone, because she got as close as possible and is just chewing it. But she's just living her best life, and I'm not going to stifle her. Anyways, in this book, Hazel wants to become a surgeon. Now, in this time period, and this is a historical fact, this is not just something that happens in the novel, during this time, physicians were looked at with esteem, where surgeons were looked at as butchers, and just, they were scared. People were scared of surgeons, because surgeons learned their craft by practicing on dead bodies. Now, at this point in time, the only dead bodies that they could legally get a hold of were those people that were executed as criminals. But that's not enough bodies for all the learning that surgeons needed to do. So they would often buy fresh dead bodies from grave robbers, also known as resurrection men. Now, these grave robbers / resurrection men, which is, let's admit, a much cooler name for a grave robber, would sneak into graveyards at night, dig up these freshly buried bodies, and sell them to medical students. There is a lot of really crazy and wild actual true crime stories around these sort of things. In this book, Hazel, through circumstances, wanting to become a surgeon, works out a deal where if she can pass the surgical exam at the end of the year, she will get to continue on to become a surgeon. Problem is, Hazel needs dead bodies, and so she makes friends with a young man named Jack, who just happens to be a local resurrection man. And it's a love story. This was a lot of fun. This is YA, gothic-y. You're really rooting for Hazel, but she's 16. She's a little naive to the world, especially because she's come from an affluent family. She's grown up wealthy, and she has always kind of believed that if she wants something bad enough and she works hard enough, she will achieve it. But in the real world, that's just not how things always work out. It's not always the person that wants it the most or works the hardest that succeeds. Unfortunately, in an ideal world, that would be how it works. But in real life, it's just not always how things work out. You're also dealing with the sexism of the time, classism. There's a lot going on in this not so big book. Also, the gothic stuff happens from a mystery that's happening kind of unbeknownst to our main characters. It's living in the background, and you as the reader are aware of a lot more than they actually are, or are paying attention to things that I don't know how they would even know these things are happening, but there's a mystery happening as well. I've heard this also described as kind of like Frankenstein. Fans of Frankenstein will enjoy this, and I can see why, even though I'm not the biggest Frankenstein fan. Immortality picks up about 6 months after Anatomy lets off. I will say, if you enjoy Anatomy of a Love Story and you are interested in continuing on with this one, Winnie's moving the camera. Just gotta get comfy. You comfy? Don't read the epilogue in Anatomy, a Love Story. I think it was included because they weren't sure if the story was going to continue on, if this was going to be a duology. And so that little nugget was given to you so you felt satisfied at the end. But since this book exists, don't read the epilogue. I really think it kind of takes away from the mystery that would be the big mystery going into book 2. But as is with most sequels, we pick up with our character where they left off. Hazel continues on with the things that she can continue on with. She's still working towards her dream as best she can. There's mysteries, there's intrigue, and the world opens up. We go to bigger places. We meet more people. This was fine. I enjoyed Hazel as a character and seeing where she went, and this wraps everything up with a nice big bow at the end. So I'm glad it exists, but I didn't love it as much as the first one. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I was really surprised how much I enjoyed it. Washing machine has decided that it is going to be on the loudest spin cycle ever right now, so that's fun for us. The next book I picked up after that was from Kindle Unlimited, and that is Vicious Bonds. I believe this is the first book in the Tethered series, and that is by Shanora Williams, I believe. This book I picked up because it said it was a fantasy romance that was inspired by Peaky Blinders, and I thought that sounded super fun. Why not? I love picturing Cillian Murphy as the main love interest in a fantasy romance. I'm into that. This is the story of Willow. She is a normal lady living a normal life when she starts hearing a voice and start seeing these mirage type things happening. And one day she gets sucked into another world, and the voice that she's been hearing that has also been hearing her is a man named Cass, and he is our Peaky Blinders gangster type man. And these two are fated to be together. They are in this world. There is some kind of mating bond that is super strong, and with any of these like mating bond type things, it either goes one of two ways. It's either immediately insta love, we can't get enough of each other, or we are fighting this bond and, but the bond is so strong, we're actually perfect soulmates for each other, but we're push and pull, we're not sure we really want it. This tried to go the route of the we hate each other, but we have a bond thing going on, but I didn't love how it went, because it wasn't like as the story progressed they actually started to get to know each other as people, and that's what kind of opened them up to the idea of having a bond with each other. Instead, these two people absolutely hated each other, but they just had this physical attraction that neither one of them really consented to that was pulling them together, and I didn't feel like they really were getting to know each other at all. It was just like, well, I guess we're gonna like each other because we have to, even though I don't like you as a person. I ended up DNFing this. I did not like it, and the Peaky Blinders vibes couldn't save it because it was all over the place, because it was all over the place. And I didn't care. I didn't care about anybody, and I didn't care about if they got together or not, and this was not good. So don't read it. Don't read it. It's not good. The next book I picked up after that one was Empire, and this is from the new Protectorate series. This is 1.5, but this is the only book that I have read in this series. These are by Abigail Kelly. I picked this up off Kindle Unlimited because this was, again, on the list of books that my Goodreads friends had given me with no third act breakup romances, and I was in the mood for a romance that didn't have a third act breakup. This is the story of Zia. She is a garden witch, and she has been hired on to work at this big fancy estate and be in charge of this rose garden. She has her earthy witchy powers and is very into gardening, and has been hired on to keep these beautiful historic gardens alive. And her boss is a vampire named Harlan, and she has never met him, and I think she's been working at this grand estate for about a year. When the book opens up, she is speeding towards the estate because some big frost is about to happen, and she's got to get there to save the roses, or a whole year of her life's work will be lost because the roses aren't going to do well in the frost. This is the circumstance that leads to her meeting Harlan for the very first time. Now, Zia has been dreaming about what interactions with Harlan would be like, and it just so happens that Harlan has been dreaming about what interactions with Zia would be like. This is definitely, I'm gonna call this insta-love, but it's not really. These characters have been pining for a while. You, as the reader, just have not been there with them. Harlan is very wealthy and has a very dark past, and that is where all the conflict and drama of the story comes from. I really enjoyed this. I haven't read anything, I don't believe, from this author before, or if I have, I don't remember. But this is a very, very sweet vampire witch romance, and there's no third act breakup. I really, really enjoyed this. It was super fast to get through, and it made me want to pick up more books from this series as well. The next book I picked up after that is When She's Fearless, and that is from the Ristiverse series by Miss Ruby Dixon. This is the most recent release in the Ristiverse series, and the Ristiverse is, even though I hate to call it this, my guilty pleasure. These are alien romances about women who live on a refugee planet, and in these stories, women have been kidnapped from Earth and found themselves in horrible circumstances throughout the universe. But an alien set up a refugee planet for all of these women to live on, so they are rescued from their circumstances, brought to this planet, and given the tiniest bit of grass and said, go and do the farming. So these women have all been through very traumatic things. So check your trigger warnings before picking up any of these books. But they now live on this refugee planet, and through various reasons, mostly because they live on a giant planet full of big scary aliens, and having a big scary alien on your side would be a great thing, they all try and find different husbands to keep them safe or for different reasons. A lot of these stories are really, really sweet and very, very short and easy to get through. This one is following our character Chelsea, and not gonna lie, this isn't my favorite installment in the series, but it's the Ristiverse, so I had to read it. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of her alien boyfriend, because I will literally put it here for you. Pronounce that. I can't wait till I want to just listen to the audiobook so I can hear how this is pronounced, because I have no idea. I'm bad enough at pronouncing things as it is. This is an insta-love story between Chelsea, who has been through some traumatic stuff, and because of all the trauma she's been through, she now has this outlook on life where she just doesn't, she's just like, consequences. I'm gonna do what I want, and I'm not gonna worry about what could possibly happen. She has no sense of self-preservation anymore because she just can't live like that. She lived through too much, and she's like, nope, I don't care if it's dangerous. I don't even want to think about it anymore. She ends up falling in love with our male main character, and you know, it was sweet and quick and easy to get through. The acknowledgements at the end of this actually talked about this book and the next book in the series being because Ruby Dixon and her family got a new cat, and they were talking about how this new kitten that they had this very like lack of self-preservation, and the vet said, well, that's because it's a cat that lived on the streets at some point. It was adopted and taken into a home, but these cats that are kind of street cats, they have two directions they go. They are either scared of everything and kind of feral, or they are scared of nothing and just flying by the seat of their pants. So it's a trauma response to living on the streets. So Chelsea is our, well, I don't even think about danger anymore cat. And our next book that has been announced, I believe, and is coming out soon, is going to be our I Suspect Everyone and I'm a Feisty, Scratchy, Bitey Kitten cat book, Ristiverse. I'll probably like that one more, honestly. The next book that I picked up after that one was The Blood Trials by N.E. Davenport. I actually talked about this book in the vlog where I had my dogs pick what I read. This is the story of Ikenna, otherwise known as Kenna. She lives on this planet, in this world, in this country, in this republic, whatever you want to call it, where her grandfather used to be in a leadership position where he was very powerful, and then he passes away, and Kenna and those around her grandfather suspect that he was murdered, that he didn't die of natural causes. So Kenna goes down this path of becoming a elite soldier in this very, very hard to get into program to infiltrate from the inside and figure out who had something to do with her grandfather's death. This is basically if Legendborn and Red Rising had a baby. That would be this book, because it has the infiltrating this corrupt government from the inside, you know, vengeance type mission, but also these trials that you're going through that are dangerous, that you have to prove yourself, and you basically have to become the golden child of the horrible government military situation. But also in this one, it's much more YA. Our character is 19. There's all the YA angst and YA-based decisions. Because our character is 19, all of the jumps to judgment and quick decisions that she make are realistic because she's young, she's 19, she's grieving, she doesn't have all the life experience that someone much older or someone that had been existing in this government for longer would have. But sometimes it's hard to read. She's also a runaway train of vengeance, and that is sometimes hard to watch as well. I enjoyed this. I think that the parts of it that felt like Red Rising, because Red Rising is definitely a favorite of mine, I enjoyed. The parts that felt more Legendborn, that YA, I'm the chosen special one type stuff, didn't really rock my socks off, but that's okay. I think some people really like that. Not a new favorite, but I'm glad I read it. Next book we're going to talk about is actually from another reading blog as well, and that was from Reading Books that I had seen the movie but never read the book. And this, Birdbox by Josh Malerman, was the first book that I read. I think that I came upon this book in a free little library and had never read it, and I watched the movie when it came out the one time and then never watched it again. So I remembered the gist of it, but couldn't really remember anything specific about it other than Sandra Bullock was in it. But I enjoyed this book. It is very different from the movie. The movie kind of took the basic premise and added to it, changed it, made it its own. And the movie would have to, because I don't think that if you did an actual, like, really, really true to the book adaptation, that it would really be very watchable. A lot of the things that Mallory does are not gonna make you like her. They make sense, and she's doing them for the survival of herself and the survival of those around her. They're important, but they're not nice. Mallory's not doing she's doing not nice things to keep everybody alive. You are inside of her head in this book, so you understand why she's doing it and how she's conflicted about it, and that Mallory doesn't want to be the person that she has to be to ensure that she survives, and so do those around her or those in her care survive. What she does is not something that I could see Sandra Bullock doing, so I'm sure that's why they changed it. I enjoyed this. It was a quick read, not a favorite. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars, just like the movie. I enjoyed the movie just fine, but it's not a new favorite, and I don't need to watch it all the time. The last book that we're going to talk about today, I actually got from the library on audiobook, and that was Bunny by Mona Awad. This book, I went into it knowing bare minimum, and that's all really anybody can give you about it. This is a dark academia story, and we are following our main character, Sam, who is in a graduate, or Samantha. She's in a graduate program at a prestigious college for writing, and within the same group as her in her graduate program is a group of women that call themselves the Bunnies, and they are all cutesy, hyper feminine, and over the top when it comes to affection for each other. Sam and the Bunnies butt heads at first, but then Sam gets pulled into the inner circle that is the Bunnies, and things, crazy things, wild things are happening. I've heard this described as like Heathers meets The Craft, or Mean Girls meets The Craft meets Heathers, but it's even weirder than that. I feel like if that was the case, it would be a little bit more straightforward. This book is off the rails. I think the writing was amazing. This author is fantastic at describing things and putting pictures in your mind. I really enjoyed the writing. I still don't know if I enjoyed the story, and I still don't know if I know what happened. I can tell this is satire, but it's satire for something that I don't have a lot of insight into, and so some of it hits and some of it you're like, wait, is that really happening, or are they hallucinating? There's also a lot that goes on with the character. Sam, our main character, is narrating the story, and she will narrate possible things that will happen, but that's not exactly what happens. Kind of like an inner monologue of like, I'm going to tell this person this thing, and this is how they're going to react, and then this is going to happen next. And then in the next breath, Sam says the thing, and that's not how the person reacts. And so you're trying to remember what the actual reactions were. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I knew going into it, this was kind of polarizing. Some people really love this book, and some people, it's just a complete miss for them. I think I fall somewhere in the middle. I had a good time reading it. I kept picking it up, but I don't know what I read. I don't know what I read. And I don't really know what happened. But like, I know what happened, but is that what happened? I think I would read more from this author, for sure. But sometimes do you ever just feel like you're just not smart enough for what you're reading? I felt not smart enough, and that's okay. But that, kids, is where we are going to end this recent reads. I read some really good books, and I'm thinking I might be out of my reading slump, but I'm a little nervous to say that out loud, just in case it shows up again. Please hit subscribe if you'd like to hear me talk about books again anytime soon. I hope you're reading good books out there, wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.